Hello Bits and Bones, my name is Lady V, and welcome to my channel. I just watched Venom 2, Let There Be Carnage, and I wanted to take a minute to ask, what Carnage were they speaking of? In this video, I will be talking about why I was disappointed in both the Venom movies, and how that disappointment deepens because of the franchise's potential. There are a lot of elements to Venom that could have been great, but were either mishandled or poorly executed. First, let's talk about the movie's rating. I will be eternally baffled by Sony's insistence on making the Venom movies PG-13 for airing in theaters. Venom's inherent link to the Spider-Man franchise does not mean it's meant for children. Venom is not supposed to be a likable kid's hero. He's an adult anti-hero. He's a goddamn villain, an alien, that eats people's heads, or is supposed to survive, and should swear and do all sorts of morally ambiguous activities. But he's been toned down for the sake of packing kids in the audience. And you know what that does? That makes a lesser experience for the actual fan base of what the Venom movies should have been, and made a movie that's hard to relate to or hold kids' attention in the first place. If Venom had been treated akin to Deadpool, it would have had a smaller market but a more engaged fan base. They could have kept the gore rather than pan off screen while it happens, strengthening the directing and visuals, adding edgier comedy, and also solidifying the complexity of the characters. P.S. No, I have not watched the new Spider-Man No Way Home, and no, I have no idea if Venom actually is in it, but I did see the after credits of Venom 2 that implies Venom and Eddie had universe hopped into the current MCU. Please do not spoil Spider-Man for me, but in acknowledging Venom and the current Spider-Man franchise's link to one another, I want to say that my point about treating Venom more like Deadpool in terms of film content still applies. You can bring R-rated movie characters into a PG-13 movie, it's just a matter of doing it well, having logical barriers that prevent the content from airing on the R-rated side. I mean, look at the fan base for Deadpool compared to Spider-Man, and yet, Deadpool x Spider-Man is the hottest ship in the Marvel comics you've ever seen. And I say that objectively, anyone feel free to come and fight me over it. Their chemistry can't be beat, and that's because the contrast between the smartass mercenary and the witty good boy. Doing Venom justice in its own movies would help the franchise more than inhibit it from being compatible with Spider-Man, which was the end goal that they did themselves a disservice accomplishing. Okay, now let's talk about the humor. As poorly written and oddly juvenile a lot of the jokes in Venom are, I can't see a kid understanding or laughing at them. And can I say, I'm very confused by the joke writers for the script. They set themselves up for a joke, like an easy joke, and then they just don't do the rational follow-through. Part of me wonders if it was to subvert our expectations of the jokes, but that really just forced me into an eye-roll response. The whole point of a joke is a payoff or a logical disconnect, but we just got a less funny response in the same vein as the setup alluded to. Like, okay. All of Venom's intrusive dialogue when he's drawing Eddie's attention away from someone else were mildly annoying instead of amusing. The comments he made were so forced, it was a little bit painful. The humor in Venom was one of the things about it that was the most disappointing, because for a few moments, I did like it a bit. I could see the potential in what they were going for. The execution was just wrong. Like Venom getting on stage and discovering himself in front of a crowd of humans. That could have been a genuinely cute moment, or at the very least an awkward one. Especially if in ending his speech he chose to be himself and eat someone's head in front of everyone, accepting his true self, but he just walks away and drops the mic. Drops the mic like the hideous burst of sound that produces wouldn't hurt him, which is something to point out as a logical oversight. Venom 2 felt like they had things that they wanted to have happen, and no good story to go behind making them happen. So let's get on to the plot. There was no plot. No. Really. The plot was a meaningless rehash of parts of the first Venom movie and cardboard cutouts of conflict. There was absolutely no weight to Venom and Eddie's separation. It wasn't just a matter of the audience knowing they'd make up and join forces again by the end of the movie. It was a fight contrived out of nothing, to the point where the characters really didn't want to bother going through the motions. It was totally unconvincing. It was just two kids saying one mean thing to each other and storming off, just to come back a couple hours later and apologize because they never wanted to be mad in the first place. In a movie as short as an hour and a half, they still managed to waste my time doing the same tired routine of Venom and Eddie fighting with each other and getting thrown around their apartment. Like we haven't done this before. And the weird thing is, Venom and Eddie got back together under the threat of the idea of Carnage. Not because there was anything pressing happening. You know what would have been more compelling? Them having to settle their differences and put their egos aside because the woman that they both care about was kidnapped. But no, she gets kidnapped after they've already got back together and are on the case, which made their whole conflict a matter of just filling time. And speaking of filling time, the villains. The villains were an afterthought in this movie. They might have been the boss fight at the end, but they did next to nothing to move the plot along, because the plot was just Venom and Eddie being childish, butthurt butt buddies. Cletus Cassidy as a villain was humanized, but he was never contextualized. We're told that he was abused as a child, so he feels he's justified in being a killer, and we're shown that despite all of that, he is capable of unconditional love for Shriek, but Cletus isn't fleshed out in the movie as a terrible person. We have no grasp of what evil person he actually is, what he's done. Yes, they say he's a serial killer and done terrible things, but like, what did he do? Why is he so evil that the state decided to reintroduce the death penalty? Like, what the fuck did you do, Cletus? It's a classic case of telling instead of showing. The villains are written as characteristically chaotic evil, with no justification for them being that way. They both have so many lines of quirky dialogue, delivered in a way meant to be intimidating, and it's like, we get it, you're crazy. In the end, this might sound odd, but the biggest disappointment of Venom 2 for me was Shriek, and that's because she was the most profound of all the movie's missed opportunities. I'm not saying I have a problem with Shriek because she's a useless female character presented as powerful then constantly undermined and defined by her relationship with a man, although she is. I'm sad that they didn't utilize her as a character for something else. They took the idea of Shriek and totally botched it. She was so inconsequential, using her as a motivator for Cletus was basically a moot point. They added her into the film just to use her power when she should have known not to, presenting her kind of as an idiot, and then killing her instead of, using her in a different Venom movie or position because of her own inherent oppositional force. Because the character of Shriek, with that mutation, not this specific rendition of being with Cletus, has such a great potential in the Venom franchise. The dynamic of a mutant that can incapacitate Venom and symbiotes is awesome, and they just decided to throw that away on this. Not to mention Carnage as like the villain to Venom, like Abomination is to Hulk, and they just basically threw him away as a character too. There was nothing fun or endearing about him. He was a moot point. Where was the fucking Carnage? If you've watched the Venom movies, let me know what you thought about them. Maybe they leave such a sour taste in my mouth because they're poorly done in the direct wake of how popular the MCU became. I know it's hard to stack up compared to a lot of recent Marvel movies, but I can't help feeling like they made the second Venom movie simply to make a movie, and just so they can tie it into something bigger. Which scares me, by the way. Like I said, I haven't seen the new Spider-Man, but that end credit on Venom 2 got me shook. I'm skeptical how the Venom franchise, which is such a chaotic cluster of poorly done pieces, can do anything good for the Spider-Man gems they've been putting out lately. And I'm very, very scared what will come of this new development. But I guess I'll just have to see, because all the theaters are closed and all that. So, that's the end of the video and or rant, I suppose. You can call me a nerd if you want, but I do just like good content, and I want to see better from things being produced. If you'd like to support me and my content, though, I've left a link to my Patreon in the description below. If you become a bone tier patron or above, there's movie voting, and you can have sway in what I end up watching, which could be Venom 3 if they make a Venom 3, and God, I'd probably watch that on my own anyway, but I don't want to. Give me incentive, please. And ultimately, if you decide to become a patron, I would love to welcome you to our Bits and Bones server of creativity and being just lost. But productive, very productive. So as always, I would like to thank my patrons and all you Bits and Bones for watching. If you're interested in other things that I'm doing, you can check them out in the links below on my link tree, and if not, I will see you in the next video. Bye!